Hi, thanks for listening in. This is another one of our podcasts on our AI Readiness series. I'm Jason, one of the directors and founders at Horizon Digital. You might have seen me on previous podcasts, but here today with the wonderful Brigette. She's founder and director at Matrix Data, and I'm going to get her to tell a little bit about herself.
Thanks, Jason. Great to be here. So my background, I've come from a bit of a diverse background, predominantly mining, resources sector, operational, and then transitioned into technology roles, really driven by actually working with data and systems and getting a little bit frustrated with that along the way, but also excited about the opportunities for AI and data science. So founded Matrix Data, and so now that's what we do, geoscience information management and helping people get AI ready.
Nice. It's pretty exciting. It's a really big topic. I think and so many things come to my mind to ask you about. I guess one thing that's sort of intrigues me is why AI, why data ready, why any of that stuff?
Yeah, so how I actually first found data science or predictive analytics was that I was working with a lot of time series data as a geotechnical engineer, and I realised that we could get into a proactive space and actually start to be predicting and managing things a little bit more proactively rather than just reacting to various alarms. So that was a bit like I say, a bit like finding God. That was way back in 2008 on a remote mine site where I was so excited, came out and was like, how cool is this? We should be doing this. And everyone just looked at me like I was crazy.
So was this like capturing what was going on into some Excel spreadsheet and?
Yeah, so access databases, spreadsheets, notebooks.
Okay.
One of the biggest frightening moments that I had was actually walking into a site and asking where all their data was, and they pointed to a big pile of notebooks sitting on the shelf, and I was pretty horrified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I know you do a lot of work with mining companies, and do you think that even though I'm sure that a lot of that's electronically stored now, there's still a lot of paper being used?
In different places, yeah. So it's I think it's fair to say that people are very much at different points along the journey to being AI ready and adopting AI. And I think, it would be, you would think it's quite surprising actually, but there is still data being captured on paper in notebooks. And of course, the big one, which we talked about earlier, is people who live in Excel hell.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess before we go too far down that track, I guess I wanted to get the listeners to sort of get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
So I guess I got this question for you, and that's what's something that people don't normally know about you?
Okay, so apart from a couple of weeks ago was the first time that I went south of Mandurah.
Yeah, right.
After having lived in Perth for, I don't know, about 8-9 years now, and actually living in Mandurah for 4 of those.
So of that time, so you lived in Mandurah, but you never drove further south than Mandurah?
No, and I used to collect wine, so I'd never been to Margaret River, which is everybody who knows me always just cannot get their head around.
Yeah. Is that because you're behind the computer too much?
Well, that and my husband doesn't drive. So being the sole driver, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you can't get on the wine and drive. I guess that's a bit of a deterrent to get down there then.
Exactly. And if there's nothing I learnt from mining, it's safety first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, I mean, we're talking a little bit about Excel hell, and I guess, there's AI is a pretty large topic, and it's, on the forefront of a lot of people's mind at the moment. And I guess, in your view, can we just, do most businesses just go, let's just go and do some AI, and they think it's, you just, get a consultant in, or maybe just use ChatGPT and you're doing AI. What's sort of your view on that, and what are you seeing out there?
So people think of AI as being the next shiny thing. So they're like, oh yeah, I want me some of that. So they don't tend to look so much at where they are or where they want to get to. They just, let's get me some AI, and they think it's going to solve all their problems, but they haven't actually, in a lot of cases, articulated what is the problems that they're actually trying to solve. Yeah, I imagine you guys would see that quite a bit too in your business.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and I find I guess it's similar in the way that we see people they want to take advantage of all the spruiked and rightly so, like really good value you can get out of using
100%.
AI, but they haven't, they're still a step behind, potentially still, as you said earlier, running their business or collecting their data on physical pieces of paper and then scanning them in a picture format, say in a not electronic document management system that people can't search, and that data is ultimately not accessible. And then, as we talked about as well, people running their entire businesses or a big chunks of it in Excel, and I think that's common. Even, I'm always surprised that people think that it's only common in small businesses, but in my experience, and I think in yours too, is some of the largest businesses around town run a lot of their workloads on Excel.
Very, very much so. Yeah, and surprisingly big.
Yep.
Companies.
And then so from that, they're collecting data in Excel, they're running formulas on it, and then they're copying and pasting these Excel sheets and sending them around the world. And then, I'm assuming that a lot of that data can be, damaged by human error.
Yeah.
And it's incorrect. And then large decisions are made on this data that probably isn't even accurate.
That's right. And, it ranges from technical people that have dragged the wrong formula, so some sort of technical calculation that they're using in their modelling isn't correct, anything to pretty significant reporting, similar kind of story.
Yeah. And then some of this data is going all the way up to the board, large companies, and
True.
making decisions on whether they should invest in a new mine or a new piece of technology, and that the data it's been used to model that information or that decision on is potentially inaccurate, and no one would even know because 10 people have modified that Excel spreadsheet. Some of those formulas are extremely complex, and you need to be almost a scientist on site to figure out if it's right or wrong, and so it's impossible to know.
Been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've done a few projects like that, so they're particularly challenging, but I think it's, if nothing else, it's rewarding when you get to see that and work with people who are really committed to go on that journey and get themselves out of that situation and end up in a situation where they are actually ready to take advantage of AI in a meaningful way, and they've got a good plan.
Yeah, nice. What would you say in your experience, what's been, I guess, the most eye-opening or interesting story you can tell around people running their business in spreadsheets and things not going so well?
Well, that's a few. But I think one of my favourite stories is actually where I first started using the phrase or the term AI Readiness. And I was actually having a conversation with some AI consultants, and we were getting right into all the tech stuff about the different models and algorithms and all of that. And one of them told me a story about how they'd been working with a client, and they were still capturing things on paper, and they went through and they had physical whiteboards. So they actually went through and I identified, they said to them, look, really hate to say this to the client, but you guys are just not ready. And they said, look, one of our recommendations is you switch out your whiteboard to be a digital whiteboard and then come back, see how that goes, and then we can talk again. So the clients actually came back to them and said, we've had a 20% uplift in our productivity just from switching over to a digital whiteboard. So you can keep your AI for now. We're actually pretty happy with that. So and that was when I realised that actually what Matrix Data does and I do is help people to get ready and go on that journey from the whiteboard or the paper or Excel or wherever they happen to be, to a place where they're actually ready to take advantage of AI.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So I would say, like that's an example of a client of yours that, they heard AI and they wanted to really invest in, getting some, I guess, some extra value or efficiency out of it. But really they were so far back in that process that something as simple as changing a physical whiteboard to an electronic one gave them such uplift. And so would you say like a lot of your business focus is around helping clients understand like inefficiencies they can gain at the very beginning of that journey?
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily have to be very complex AIs or data models or structures. Sometimes it's as simple as moving data from a spreadsheet into a centrally accessible, stored and structured location or a simple web app or something like that.
No, exactly. And I think actually the first step even before that is really having people understand that it is a journey, and it's not always easy. There can be low hanging fruit, like I think the digital whiteboard is a pretty good example of that one. But in many cases, like getting out of Excel hell, for example, that's definitely not an easy task for a lot of people. And as we know, I mean, myself probably not included a lot of the time because I'm excited by change and the opportunity that it brings, but people are generally wired to not want to change.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other interesting part of going through that process is actually really realizing that to get the most advantage out of AI and the journey is that you're going to have to change the way that in many cases that your business operates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So what would you find like in terms of if you're trying to work with a client on moving out of Excel hell, what are the biggest sort of excuses or reasons for them not interested in thinking that the way that they're running that is fine?
So interestingly enough, I think a lot of people actually realise that it's not good. And I think in that case for those people, they just don't, they either don't have the bandwidth or the knowledge to get themselves out, and it's a big commitment. So most people are quite busy just doing their normal stuff, and even though getting themselves out of that situation would mean that they'd have more time and more productivity and all the rest of the good stuff, how you actually get from that point to the next point is often a lot of work. So I think that's a really interesting piece when you can see how frustrated people are with the way that they're working, but they just don't know how to get there. The other one is people who just don't know what good looks like. So they're like, I know I want to move. I know I'd like to incorporate AI or just do things better and get out of Excel hell, but ultimately I don't know what the future looks like. So it's being able to articulate, well, yes, my workflows and my business need to change, but what does the future state actually look like? And then there's other people who just think it's fine. So they haven't even made that first step, which is understanding that they want to go on the journey, which I think is in a lot of cases the commitment to go on the journey is probably the biggest first step.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you think, does it always have to be a large undertaking, or is there a way that you can do it just focusing on something small and making some quick wins?
I think so. I think with anything and with any change projects, it's always useful and beneficial to have a couple of quick wins because it sort of makes everybody feel better about the hard work that they still have to do, or feel better about some of the other things that are going to take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So as with many of these kind of projects, that you can find an area where you test it out.
Yeah.
One might be one specific workflow, might be a specific data set, start small, demonstrate the change. But I think ultimately you also ideally want to have a bigger picture in mind of where do we actually want to go with this. Yeah. Maybe you kind of have an idea, maybe doing that little pilot or that little proof of concept also helps to form the vision of, oh, okay, so if we really change that one thing and we could achieve that, and actually we all survived the change,
Yeah.
and we're happy about it, then that makes it easier to say, all right, now let's really sit down and look at the bigger business process. Let's look at our workflows. Because I think that's the other thing that people don't always appreciate is I always think that you need to have the vision of where you want to get to, but in order to map the journey out, you need to understand where you are.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I think, like, for me, it's interesting that I always feel like, I always say to people, data is one of the most valuable assets in your business. Like, yes, people are a really valuable asset too, but they come and go. Data is for the life of your company, and that's really the heart of it. And, if that's the most valuable asset, I know if I was lucky enough to own a Lamborghini, I would keep it, in a nice garage. I'd look after it. I'd service it. I'd have it neat and tidy. I'd wash it. But, we see time and time again, companies don't really, they seem to understand that data is important, but they don't value it enough to spend the time to make sure that it's structured correctly, it's accurate, it's backed up, it's legible, it's useful.
Yeah.
And it's surprising, right? Because if it's that important, why isn't there an emphasis on it? And the people that do understand it often, then they try to go down that journey, and it seems like quite a big barrier. I guess for the listeners, I mean, we're talking quite high level, but at the same time, let's go into a bit of like an example about how, like, so if we're talking about AI, like as a business, what's an example of why you might want to look after your data, and how useful can that be in the future? What kind of things does that enable you to be able to do that you couldn't really do on Excel, or, that you can maybe, future-proof your business with?
Sure, yeah. So I think one of the areas which has had a lot of focus and is quite relevant, obviously, to mining and resources, and it also goes to what you were just saying, actually, is a lot of the exploration companies, they're quite small, but when you look at it, the data is actually their asset. Like, they may have the tenements and access to the land and all of that stuff, but ultimately when they go to market, what they go to market with is their data.
Yeah.
And so
what's that, like drill locations, depths, what they found, the makeup of the soil in the ground?
Exactly. Yep. So and there you go. There's a great example of the changing importance on data. Is it was many years ago now, but at a place where they'd actually spent quite a significant amount of money drilling all their holes out. But at that stage, they'd been very focused on where the good stuff was. So they'd actually thrown out a lot of the other stuff. So then when it came time to actually build the mine, and I spent many years as a geotechnical engineer, you care about the waste because you actually care about keeping the pit walls from falling in so you can get the good stuff out. So going back through the data, it just wasn't there.
Yes. And I imagine the value of the commodity has changed over time, and if you had a high, whatever, copper reading, but you're trying to do an iron ore mine, you probably don't care about that.
Exactly.
But maybe in 5 years' time you will, and if you don't have that data, well, someone has to.
And there's actually a few stories about where they were originally looking for a particular style of deposit, so they didn't assay or they didn't analyse for certain results, and then things change, and then someone decided, oh, what if we analyse for this? And all of a sudden, oh, we've got something here. Yeah. So the other one, of course, from an exploration perspective is, the better shape your data in, and I think spatial stuff is really important, but also the depth, and that is looking for new deposits.
Yeah.
So being able to do that, and a lot of the bigger companies are actually starting to do that increasingly, and there have been for some time now. But there's real understanding and appreciation of being able to bring together all your data from across Australia, for example, and apply AI to that is going to give you insights that you can't get or couldn't get from looking at, say, a small pocket of data in isolation.
Yes.
And that translates from regional to, to Australia-wide and even international as well, which is very interesting.
So interestingly on that, I guess, like in your view, do you think if you had access to some really good topical graphs and maps plus some really good data on core hole samples, do you think AI could replace a geologist?
Look, I think this is always a very topical conversation. I think ultimately we have to understand that models need verification. So as great as AI is, there's the explainable AI fact as well. So it's a little bit like how AI has been incorporated into the banking sector and recruitment, for example. You always have to be conscious of bias.
Yes.
So it's really, at this stage, you need the people who are the domain experts to kind of be like the AI police. So is the model making sense? Because I've seen that too, where people have tried to do some impressive things with AI and ultimately the results are a bit garbage.
Yeah.
So that can come out of production, optimizing production aspects. And again, so it's two aspects. One is the data's going into the model is inherently flawed, and we all know garbage in, garbage out. Or it's fundamentally that the people building the model or the model itself doesn't have that domain knowledge. And so you always need someone to come in and go, oh, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Like you can't, there's not a deposit in the sky. Like,
yes.
you know, so it'd be pretty interesting if there was, but like it's just doesn't quite meet the laws of physics as well. So
is it because there's also an element of luck in it? So there's like the makeup of how the geology is, of you knowing that maybe there's more likely to be stuff here, but there's always an element of a bit of guesswork, I guess. Would that be true, and that's not really going to be covered by AI?
Well, I think too that's when you have to understand as well as we know that is this. I mean, we say AI, right, as a big umbrella, but there's a lot of different things that are AI could be considered. So, you know, data science, predictive analytics, you know, even if you, I mean, it's probably a very simplistic example, but even if you have a bunch of points on a graph and you draw a line through it, you know, in the simplest terms, even a regression calculation is a form of data science and which gets bundled into AI. So
absolutely,
I think there's AI and there's AI, and understanding how those different things apply. It's because it's, I guess, it's a bit like the hammer approach. Like sometimes you don't need a hammer. Sometimes you don't need a Lamborghini to just go to the post office. Yeah.
Doesn't look as cool though.
No, true. I'd go for an Aston Martin myself, but yeah.
No, it's an interesting point, and I think that's, you know, it's something we used to talk about a lot when you know agile ways of working, and that was a really big buzzword. And then, you know, and this is like us both being in that sort of consulting space, is people get really good at selling things, and so they pick up on these terms that they get a lot of traction, and they turn it into something that's not. And then usually you end up if you try to help people, you know, really understand what it is, the consultants that are selling these big dreams to, you know, to C-suite and executives, they just go to like a conference and like, we need AI, but without actually understanding what that actually is, because they were sold something that's not that it's not realistic. It's just that there's a lot of words used to package things up to sell a bunch of services that, like you say, is a hammer that, you know, not everything's a nail in that business. So it's not exactly like fit for purpose.
Yeah.
And also a lot of things that are not even AI. And if we talked about this with other people as well, and, you know, generative AI is a new thing.
Yes.
But AI itself, you know, it's been around as long as I can really remember. We didn't call it that, right?
That's exactly. and that was kind of like, you know, it was when I had this story about finding discovering predictive analytics. And at that stage, really, that would be kind of bundled into the AI and, data science. But even at that point, no one knew what data science was. It wasn't a thing. Like, they didn't have courses at uni that were data science. I know because I looked at the time because after I got so excited.
Yeah.
And I was looking, and I think the closest I got was applied maths stats meets computer science, like one of those computing maths type courses. Yeah, so it's very interesting how things have changed. Yeah.
So do you feel like some of the sort of advances in technology recently have made, because I know if we go back, say, like 5 years or so, maybe even 10 years, people were starting to store data into databases.
Yeah.
More like data lake kind of situation, or data warehouses, I think we used to call
data
them.
swamps.
Data swamps, yeah. But
not always.
Yeah,
but
and they'll run on big IBM mainframes and whatever
Yeah.
else, right? But that was expensive to set up.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the output of that was just some basic reports on how we're tracking against budget, and so that was a bit out of reach for your general
But even
mid-tiers.
before that, like Hadoop's been around for a while, right?
Yes.
So big data's not new, actually. Yeah.
But would you say it's probably more accessible now because of
totally.
the emergence of big cloud providers who can provide some really decent
Definitely.
compute power and storage?
Yep. And it's not an investment. Like, it doesn't have to be a capital investment. So if you're doing some particular modelling and you need, you want all the compute you can throw at something, then you can just dial it up and then switch it off when you're done. Yeah.
Yeah, so the rise of cloud computing, some really good tools for data transformation and
Very
data
much so.
modeling,
Yeah.
and then generative AI on top of that. So it's sort of in an era now where I guess all the cynical stuff we're talking about. Ultimately, there has been some pretty big technological advancements over the last few years, especially around this space. And so and I don't know if you feel the same as me, but I think we're at the start of like where people are actually going to start seeing the real value in their data and what they can do with it, and there's going to be a much more demand in getting that right. We're already seeing it now, right?
Yeah.
In the rise of your business in the first place.
Exactly.
So you're working with some pretty large miners sorting out their stuff because they're starting to see that if you don't have control of your data, you can't predict stuff, you don't have accurate information, you can't make good decisions. And
they're also, in many cases, which would surprise a lot of people, as we said, a lot of them are realising that the legacy Excel hell that they have is not sustainable.
Yes.
So it's one, not sustainable, and two, it doesn't provide them the platform or the base starting point to be able to leverage AI and all the new technologies. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, would you say that also, E-level or C-suite people, they know that you have the data, but because they're not usually technical, they don't even understand potentially like where their data is stored and how it's actually kept.
Very much so.
And if they knew, they'd probably have a heart attack. So how many hand on heart could you ask, God, do you know where, you got the cost of getting iron ore out of the ground? Do you know where that came from? If they found out it was 72 spreadsheets that get sent around the world with a bunch of formulas in it, they might think twice about, we probably should do something about that.
Yeah, or the classic one is, 20 years ago there was a graduate that came in and, their grad project, or a VACWork student, and their project was to solve a particular process problem. So what did they do? They built a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
That spreadsheet became the fundamental tool that they all use for that particular part of that workflow. So that, I guess, is, in some cases is that quick win, or that, or not always quick, but those opportunities for a small part where you can say, all right, that particular spreadsheet that has become business critical.
Yeah.
How can we take that out of the equation? Yeah.
That sounds really good. I guess sort of we could go on about this stuff all day, and I know we try to keep these things to about 30 minutes. So I guess like to the listeners and people who've listened to this podcast, what's something they can take away from this? What if you're looking at your own business, wherever you're working, what's something that we can do now, like to get ourselves a bit more ready for the future? What should we be looking at? How do we maybe identify some areas of opportunity, something small we can work on?
I think what you said is perfect. Actually, is take that kind of inward look and ask the question: do we know where our data is? And if you do know where your data is, or don't, once you've answered that, are you confident that it's correct? do you understand the governance? Like, can you put hand on heart and say that is the data, and the version on Joe's C drive is not the data, or actually the version on Joe's C drive is the data. So it's asking those kind of questions. I think even doing so maybe start with having a bit of a look at where you are. Having a bit of a look at where you are is going to start to help you to understand where you are on the journey already, and get some help. I think you said as well, a lot of people don't necessarily understand databases, or it's certainly my case as well, that even the Excel hell, a lot of the people don't understand the VBA code that's sitting in behind it that makes things happen magically, and then when it breaks, no one knows how to fix it.
Yeah, because they're retired.
Because they're retired.
The guy who built it
or moved
30 years ago, he doesn't work here anymore.
No, he doesn't work here anymore, because people don't usually stay in a job that long anymore. But so really, I think the first step is decide that you want to go on the journey, and the second step is have a good look and ask the hard questions about where you are.
Yeah.
And then if you're not sure, and also to help paint the picture, you guys have done quite a lot of work implementing AI. I'm more in the AI readiness journey. Get some help to understand what the future could look like, and then map out the journey. If there's things about where you are that you don't understand, get help.
I think that's why we work well together in partnerships, our businesses, because exactly that, people want to automate stuff and they haven't got their data in the right spot, so that's where we really got to start from the foundations. I guess that's sort of forgotten about in the topic of AI and AI readiness. So it's a really interesting growth area, and
it is.
And I guess if there's any listeners out there who want to talk about it some more, or get some tips, or just reach out, we'll put Brigitte's details at the bottom of the podcast, and feel free to reach out and connect with her on LinkedIn. And she's a strong user of LinkedIn. The word escapes me, but you know what I mean, right? Yeah.
Lauren, that bit can come out. Yeah.
We'll leave it in.
We'll leave it in. Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all for fun. But I really appreciate you coming in and talking to us about this topic. And it's really, I think a couple of things is it's amazing to see someone in that field, particularly in Perth, but also a woman, you know what I mean? Because it's sort of, in our generation, have that level of experience, and that's impressive. So
Thank you,
really
Jason.
Cool, and
it's always great catching up with you, and great working together.
Yeah. Until next time.
Yeah.